If I asked you to get a piece of paper and something to write with, and to make a numerical list of all the things that you would be willing to die for, how long is your list?
The Panther 48.
Willing to die for.
The Panther 48.
Willing to die for. How long is your list?
What is the tribal self?
The Panther 48.
The tribal self is what goes above the immediate acquaintances of the social.
Willing to die
The
for.
family, the people you know, live next door.
You would be willing to die for.
Tribal self.
The Panther 48.
I'm talking about those living, those yet unborn, and those who are the ancestors.
How long is your list?
So the connection with the ancestors is tied into the tribal self.
The Panther 48.
What does that mean? That means that the tribal self constantly reminds us
Willing to die for.
that we don't have the right
How long is your
to
list?
claim independence.
The Panther 48.
Peace and power. This is your big brother site. Here we are with the Panther 48. I'm 1/3 of the Panther 48. I'm your brother site calling out of Dallas, Texas. I got another 1/3 of the Panther 48, brother Robert Ward Williams.
All power to people, folks.
Calling out of San Diego, California. He's the chairman of the San Diego chapter of the Black Panther Party and the official chair that we've named the chair of the Panther 48. We got brother E, our minister of information of the Panther 48, calling out of Florida.
Greetings, black folk. Flow Rider, say it right.
Flow Rider. Anyway, today's discussion that we're going to build on, we call it KKK, the killing of Kanye and Kyrie, our perspective of economic assassination. So what we're going to do, we're going to build on not necessarily those individuals, but we're going to build on the situation that surrounds those individuals. For those of y'all that don't know what's going on in the media with those brothers, I'm going to try to make it as quick as possible by giving y'all a quick understanding. Kanye went on the show called Drink Champs by Nori and DJ Effin, that's his name. He went on a show called Drink Champs, and you can see the whole show on YouTube. But anyway, in that show, he made some statements. He made some statements that we could consider negative. You know, one of the things he said was that George Floyd, he don't believe was killed by the police officer that was leaning on his neck. He believed he was killed by the fentanyl that was in his bloodstream, things like that, that made a lot of people upset. But he also made some statements about a particular group of people that he said that control the music industry and the finance industries, and that basically locks his people out of, he said it locks his people out of those situations of control, which caused him to get censored and made him lose a lot of endorsements, a lot of deals. Basically, Kanye used to brag or be able to boast that he was the richest black man in America. I can't remember how much he had, but he was a billionaire. After the loss of those endorsements in a couple of weeks, he went from being a billionaire to being worth like $150 million. So basically, that's the situation with Kanye. With Kyrie Irving, a basketball player for the Brooklyn Nets. For those who don't know, if you remember, he started with the Cleveland Cavaliers with LeBron James, but he tweeted a link to a documentary that's played on Amazon Prime. I can't remember the name of the documentary, but it was something to the degree of the Black Hebrews and the relationship with Jews, some like that. I can't remember the name of the documentary, but he tweeted this link. Since then, he's removed the tweet, but he tweeted the link and went by, and he really himself didn't say anything. He just tweeted the link. And they said that was anti-Semitic. And, you know, they asked him to apologize. He refused. He doubled down, refused to apologize. He was in interviews where he refused to apologize. I told him to move on to the next question. I'm not talking about it. Then they started taking his endorsement deals and his finances and suspending him from games and things of that nature. So he finally apologized. So these are the two things that has occurred. These are the two things that has occurred with these two brothers. And as we say, we're going to give our opinion of economic assassination and what these things represent and mean. But I'm gonna pass this to brother E to give us, because this is not the first time this has happened. And brother E gonna give us a deeper perspective and a little background on times that this thing has happened before, the patterns of this type of behavior.
Okay. It's kind of big and lofty. So, I mean, I heard a comedian some years ago. I can't remember who the comedian was, but they referred to the situation as a nigga wake up call. Y'all remember what comedian said that shit? I don't remember. And they went on to talk about Michael Jackson and all the drama with the little kids and all of that. That was his nigga wake up call. You know, Bill Cosby's had one or two nigga wake up calls, but this just fits the pattern of whenever the ones who have the actual power in this country, in this system, decide that you're stepping out of line, there's a need for them, understandably from their point of view, to let you know that you're really not running the show. You know, back in slave days, they used to take the cat out, you know, take the biggest buck out back, surround him with all the other Africans, and beat shit out of them. Then all the other Africans standing around, the so-called slaves, hold shotguns on them so that they could watch and see what Master could do to the biggest and strongest of them. Now, mind you, it wasn't actually Master doing the beating. It was his cronies, his cats he had hired to take care of his little shit, would beat the shit out of him. And then once the brother was broken down and beaten and unable to defend himself, then Master would step in, pop him a few times, let it be known and understood that you were my nigga. And that's what it was. And this pattern, and this had the effect, you know, a lot of effects. But one of them, you know, you see sisters, a lot of times, how can I say this? It's a natural inclination of a little boy's mother to try to protect him. So when they would see this happening, automatically the woman is going to go into protective mode and try to keep her little boy from puffing his chest out, because she knows what happens when a black boy attempts to be a black man. And so over a period of time, all of this would embed genetically over generations, because it didn't just happen once, it happened generationally. It would breed this fear into each succeeding generation. And so Massa would continue to do this, you know, every generation, every time one of us stuck our heads up, even in terms of pushing back against the oppression, or you know, you got cats like Paul Robeson who pushed back in entertainment. You got cats, Dr. King, who pushed back, but when he stepped out of line and spoke about empowering the wrong people in the wrong way, when he stepped out of line and expressed discontent with the wars of imperialism overseas, they killed him. So this is a nigga wake-up call again. And what we don't, a couple of things that we don't seem to get, number one, because we don't know our history, we think every generation when this shit happens, we think this is the first time that it's happening. We're all upset because, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. Yeah, you should be able to believe it because it happened back in the 2000s, back in the 90s. It happened back in the 80s and the 70s. It happens every time. But we don't know we don't have any historical context to put it in to see the pattern. In order to see a pattern of behavior, you have to know the history. But we don't know that. We don't study that. And in terms of economics, you know, said, I think in the last show we talked about economics and how we don't understand economics. We think that because Jay-Z and Beyonce and Kanye, which they've proven the point at this point, that it just ain't so, that these cats got money and that shit means something. But we said over and over again that money is irrelevant. If anything about money really matters, it's how we use it, not how we make it. But at the end of the day, as people like to say these days, even if you have $1 billion, that $1 billion, as Kanye has proven, can be taken away. That $1 billion on an even greater scale, the value. See, we get so, Psyche used to say, show a monkey something shiny and it'll dance for you. And we get so excited over the shininess of money that we don't realize it's not having a whole bunch of money. It's what is the purchasing power of that money. Because for $1,000, what is it? I don't know, a couple, $20,000 back in the early 70s, I could have bought a nice house. So for the $1 billion back in the 1970, you'd have gotten a whole bunch more stuff, whatever it was, because of the purchasing power of the money that's in your pocket. You can have all the money you want, all the money you could ever need, but as long as somebody else is controlling what you can do, how much that money is worth, how can it be utilized, what can you buy? That's economics. But we think because we have a lot of something that it fucking matters, when it doesn't. And Kanye is just the latest in a long list of cats who get to a certain point and think they grown up, and Master got to step back in and remind them, no, you my nigga. Have you forgotten this? This is the reason that we were brought here in the first place. You know, Stokely Carmichael said that we were integrated when we first got here, just the way you integrate pigs into a farm. You don't put the pig in a position the pig's not going to be in. You need the pig at the pig's position. So the pig plays his part, and as long as the pig is cool and does what he's supposed to, the pig has a nice and happy life till it's time for slaughter. And so that's the position we were plugged into, and that's never changed. Again, Kanye had big money, so the fuck what? They shut him up. Even even more, just to the point, you have a president, a sitting president, Donald Trump. If they can silence ostensibly the most powerful man in the world, the head of the United States, if they can silence him on a Twitter platform, do you really think we have a chance trying to play their game? And if they can silence Kanye or whomever because we can't say what we want to say on a fucking channel, do you really think that we have a chance playing their game? And a lot of times people are like, oh, well, you just saying, well, there's nothing, nothing left to do. Throw your hands up. We can't win. I'm not being nihilistic. There's a lot that we can do. It's just there's nothing that we can do because we can't conceive of anything that we can do outside of what they've told us that we can fucking do. That sounds like gibberish, even in my head. But the reality of it is, as long as we think that old sit-down thought, we're going to have some sit-down action. We have to get to a point where we change our nigga mindset and realize and stop playing their game. Economics, we have to redefine. We have to redefine economics and the way that it's going to work best for us. And the only way that we can really do that is to become students of history to whatever degree. Otherwise, we keep thinking because we have a big bank account. And something just as simple, do you realize we've already been getting prepped for the time when they can cut off our money willy-nilly? People think they're not going, government's not going to cut off our money, or the bank's not going to come off our money. And you're right, the government's not going to do it. See, white folks got hip to the game. Massa always put somebody in between him and the dirty work. It's mafia shit between him and the dirty work, so that he can claim plausible deniability. Think about it. The cops go bad and kill somebody. Well, the mayor or the governor don't have nothing to do with that. That was the police. He says a heartfelt speech, blah, 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 and we get over it. We turn around and we spend our money. Part of that money goes to taxes. You buy big, red bottom shoes or TV or whatever. Part of that money in taxes, that's the government's money. The government turns around and funds the police with parts of the money that we spend, that we earn, blah, blah, blah. The police turn around and murder us. And then we can't figure out that we're paying the police to murder us. If we jump beyond all of the steps in between us and the police, okay, take the money, wipe out the, Walmart, wipe out the government, and get straight to, oh, it's the cops. There's a direct link. But because there are all these steps in there, number one, the government, the mayor, whoever, can run for re-election by denouncing that over there, but not really doing anything about it. Number two, we, Black folk, who like to spend money, make money, and go out and have fun and put that Novocaine on our jaw so we suffer peacefully and have a good time buying pretty things, get to say, oh, the police are being bad. I have enough money, I can numb myself to the reality that every time I go to numb myself, I'm empowering the police to murder our children. So we allow a level of deniability for both the government and ourselves. We scapegoat the situation ourselves because we still refuse to accept the reality of economics in this country, and that we don't understand economics. And so Kanye is just the latest, and this expands globally. Understand this is not something they just do here. This is something they do everywhere. You're talking heads of state. You're talking, what's his name? Bin Laden. Bin Laden was a homeboy of the United States. There are pictures of him shaking hands with heads of state of this country. He was trained up by the U.S. in the Mujahideen to fight Russia years and years ago, the 70s or whatever it was. And he got out of pocket, so they had to go after him. Saddam Hussein, same fucking thing. Manuel Noriega, y'all, some people might click on that name and remember hearing that shit. Manuel Noriega down in what was it, Nicaragua, wherever it was the same shit. He was a homeboy of the United States till he got out of pocket and started thinking for himself. Several cats, I believe that last cat that was assassinated in Haiti may have been, I haven't read a whole lot into them, may have been along the same lines. But they install, they pamper, they puppet, they allow Kanye and Noriega or Bin Laden or whoever to have a certain amount of power. Then when they get out of pocket, they get rid of them. And one of the reasons Zelensky is over in Ukraine fighting so hard because he's been a puppet of the U.S. He was installed by the U.S. as the president of Ukraine. And he knows that if he loses this shit, the U.S. is going to say, cool, throw him to the wolves and let his people chop him up. So this is not something that they do just to us. This is their game book. This is their game plan. This is how they operate. In this situation, they're using economics. Next situation, it might be sex, like with Michael and Bill Cosby or whatever it is. But the reality of it is they bump us, they allow us to play a role so they can sit back and say, look, y'all are doing well. Black folks are great. Obama was president. We're in a post-racial America. Woohoo. And then one of us gets out of line and he gets chopped back down. So it's just the same game over and over again. But because we're not students of history, which again is far greater than economics. And again, Kanye proves my point because he had no mindset, nothing to back him. If they were really serious, him, what's that guy's name? One of them guys I don't like, little guy, Lil Wayne. And Jay-Z and all these other cats with all this money. Why don't we have our own platform? Why don't we have our own distribution? Why are we still relying on white folks to distribute our music? If we were really about the right mindset, but we're not. We're playing their economic game, and their economic game is based on two things: private ownership and exploitation. That's what capitalism is. And both of those things are completely opposite of African people. We don't exploit by nature. We've learned their game, so we do it really well. You know, African people, whatever we do, we really do that shit. Whether it's roller skating in the South somewhere or on the beach in California, or if it's being a Muslim or a Christian, we're going to out-Christian the Jesus, and we're going to out-Muslim Muhammad. That's just the way it is. We're going to be the tops in it. So, of course, we're going to be the tops in capitalism. But exploiting other people and the resources of this planet are not things that we do. All of these hundreds of thousands of years we've been here, no climate crisis, no nuclear threat, none of that shit. We've never been on the brink of extinction globally until white folks started doing it behind capitalism because of its exploitative nature and the fact that it encourages greed and sucking shit up. And we don't understand that. We don't believe private ownership. We know that we belong to the land don't belong to us. That we're supposed to operate in a certain level of harmony because we are a part of it. White folks think they're better than that. They think that when the Bible says that we're supposed to have dominion over the planet, that's some type of a power trip for them. I have dominion, so bow down before me. No, you have a responsibility, and that's the way we looked at it. But we're playing their economic game that is based on slavery. In this country, capitalism, economics, it's all race-based because we, as a group of people, were placed at the bottom. There were poor white people But those poor white people could still lynch us and have fun and a beer on the weekend, cut off some ears and some penises so that they could have some nice souvenirs and send out some fucking postcards. So they still had a certain status above us. We as a people were brought in on the bottom. We've been kept on the bottom because if you move the bottom of the pyramid to the top, the whole thing collapses. And that's all this shit is. I'm done. My bad.
True indeed. You know, and it's funny, you know, what he just said, because Kanye constantly bragged or boasted that I can say what I want to say now because, you know, I'm super rich. I'm a multi-billionaire. I can say what I want to say. Ain't nothing that can be done to me. You know, and as he was just eloquently putting it, they showed us that there is something that can be done to him. You can't say what you want to say. Ice-T had an album, and I redrew it when I was a little boy. He had an album, You Have Freedom of Speech, but watch what you say. And the dude on the cover had a double-barrel shotgun in his mouth and 2 pistols to the side of his head. You know, you got freedom of speech, but watch what you say. And like he was just saying, Kanye thought he could say what he wanted to say. He thought he had got to a point where, okay, they can't touch me now. And he failed to realize, like, I'm gonna give a quick example, then I'm gonna pass the mic to Brother Wall. Because I know people have asked me this. How was they able to just take the money he already made? Well, what people don't understand is that when you talk about a person's net worth, it's not talking about how much cash is in their pocket. They're not basing it off how much cash a person got. That's why he went from being a billionaire to being worth 150 million, because that's about what he had in the bank, 150 million. But everything else was an estimate based off everything that he owned, all of his resources, his business deals, because he lost all those business deals. He lost the business deals with Adidas. And I gotta say, for Adidas, that was a mistake because they stock plummeted overnight when they dropped Kanye. The Adidas stock with the Yeezys, some of the ugliest shoes I ever seen in my life, but some of the most expensive shoes that people are actually running out buying and wearing and taking pictures of. Every time I see these shoes, I'm like, what the hell is going on? What makes people buy this stuff? But anyway, so and then Kanye was saying this. He was saying this, I gotta say this part too. He was saying that he wanted out his deal with Adidas. He wanted out his deal with Gap because he felt like he could do it on his own. You know, so some people are speculating that maybe this was all part of the game plan for him to get free from that to go on his own. You know, it still begs to be, you know, to be seen. One of the last things that I seen of him, he seemed more humble than he was. And he said that he had been humbled because, you know, he was bragging and he thought he was at a certain level and they showed him who he truly was. But I'm gonna pass this to War, and War can build on, you know, the psychology of a people who don't seek to control their own economics. What can make a people not want to control their own economics? And I think that what War is gonna have to do is kind of give us a definition or understanding of what economics is, because as E just said, Black people in this country really don't know what economics is. We think economics is money. That's what we think economics is. We think we're playing the game of economics because we get in the bag. That's what we really think. We getting a little cash. You even got people still saying cash is king. They really think cash is king. And, you know, I'm going to use an example, then I'm going to pass this to Brother Wall. I'm going to use an example that I learned when I was incarcerated. When I first got incarcerated, $1, and, you know, they charge you up for this stuff in prison. But $1 could buy you 4 suits when I first went to prison. It could buy you 4 suits, 4 ramen noodles. And then I watched over time that $1 could only buy you 3 ramen noodles. Then it turned to $1 could only buy you 2 ramen noodles. Now $1 can only buy you 1 ramen noodle. A ramen noodle costs you 75 cents now. And that's what he was talking about when he talked about the purchasing power. Money has a face value, then it has real value. The real value is what the money can get. And you lose real value in money every single year due to inflation. And one of the things that we have to understand is that when they gave all that quote unquote free money away, that you were going to lose a whole lot of purchasing power, because the first principle of economics is there is no such thing as a free lunch. Anybody that took a basic economics class know that the first principle of economics is there is no such thing as a free lunch. But Brother Wall, can you give us an understanding of what economics is, and then the psychology of people who don't seek to control their own economics? What type of people wouldn't want to control their own economics?
Black people.
But let me start by saying a quick breakdown, simple breakdown of economics as opposed to currency. Whereas economics is the process of controlling resources, while currency is the process of controlling economics. So people don't seem to realize that there's a difference between the currency or the control of economics. And when you talk about currency, that would be the exchange of a paper dollar or something that is not real, but utilized to control the resources, which is something that is real and tangible. So in order to control economics, you have to control the currency. And once you control the currency, then you control the people. The way the economics is controlled through currency is broken down to what I like to refer to as a trifactor in terms of energy systems. So when you talk about economics through energy systems, you have to deal with it from the standpoint of capacitance, conductance, and inductance. And most of us, most of the masses don't even understand what those three words are. So when you talk about the capacitance of something, well, what does a capacitance mean? As it applies to economic capacitance, that is basically your capitals, which is your money, your stocks, your inventory, investments, and buildings, and so forth. Whereas now when you talk about conductance, as it applies to economic conductance, these are the goods, which is basically the production. And then when you deal with inductance from an economic standpoint, those are the services. So now when we talk about what economics is, that applies to capacitance, conductance, and inductance, basically when you control the flow of economics or you control the resources themselves, that is when you are in the process of dealing with currency. Those that are in power, the quote unquote untouchables, basically control currency. And by controlling currency, you control the conduit in which economics is established. And once you do that, then it doesn't matter who's in control. It doesn't matter what laws are changed, because at that point, you control the flow of all resources. And I like to go into that from the psychological aspect of why most folks don't get it, the masses don't get it, by dealing with what the 48 laws of power, law number 11. Learn to keep the people dependent on you. That's what law number 11 says. Learn to keep the people dependent on you. It goes into further saying, to maintain your independence, you must always, always, always be needed. The more you're relied on, the more freedom you have. Make the people dependent upon you for their happiness, their prosperity, and you have nothing to fear. Never teach them enough so that they can do without you. So in other words, create and maintain a level of codependency. By having the masses dependent on you, they will have nothing, they will not be able to basically function as a free people. With this inability to operate independently, self-sufficiency and sustainability is not possible unless the one in control rations out the aid. This is where we get the concept of globalism as it applies to foreign aid. So think of this condition the same as we look at the virus AIDS in the medical world, but apply it to social engineering. Basically, AIDS stands for acquired identity deficiency syndrome. Though that is the type of AIDS we're dealing with when we talk about social engineering. Again, that's acquired identity deficiency syndrome, because basically what we are failing to realize as a people is the control of resources, or how to identify with what resources are. Therefore, because of our inability to see our identity, we have a deficiency in even recognizing natural resources. This is why on the continent of Africa, the resources are so easily swept up and pulled away from us. Within the Panther Party, we have an acronym that we use a lot called TOYS, which is basically tools of your surroundings. So when we talk about TOYS, when you have a people who only associate land with what was referred to as the topsoil perspective, in other words, whatever I can grow and harvest in order to eat, when that's the only use of land, then I'm not understanding the true value or the true power within that land, which means I'm not going to see it as a proper resource. So to me, that goes into the difference between seeing land as a resource versus seeing land as the resource. And when you get into that, you have to talk about looking at land ownership as what I refer to as planetary volume. Basically, when someone owns land, or one, and that kind of goes into the definition of resources like he was talking about. But when we talk about those people that are in power, they view land as a piece or volume of the planet. And when you see land as a volume, taking a chunk of volume of the planet, then that's the one thing you realize at that point can never be replaced. So from that standpoint, if I own a percentage of volume of the planet, then everything that depends upon that part of that volume is now all of a sudden under my control. And so because those that are in power see that control in those resources as controlling of a percentage of volume of the planet, that puts them in the category where they have basically control of everything that depends upon that. And see, when you look at it that way, you realize that everything that we know that is manifested requires the elements earth, air, water, or fire. And that is tied directly to that land that we're talking about in that volume. But as a people, we don't seem to recognize that and see that for what it is. Again, most people look at the cash as being power, like Brother Syke was talking about. But basically, the cash is just a currency that is used to exchange the resources. Whereas the people that print the currency from that standpoint have the power, not those people that depend upon having that currency in that bank, because that currency at any given time can lose its value. Just as a snap of a fingers, it can lose its value. And because we don't have real control of resources, and we're stuck relying upon a currency that is controlled and created by others, by those that are in positions of power, they at that point truly control everything that you think you may have access to. This is how somebody like Kanye can go from being a billionaire into overnight being only a low-end multimillionaire, because he's operating through the concept of currency, which we do not control. We didn't create that system of currency, nor do we regulate that system of currency. So therefore, everybody that depends upon that system of currency is not understanding that currency is the process of controlling the economics. And so they have to be able to really draw the distinction between currency and economics. And to me, one of the funny things I would say about that is that what you had found Kanye constantly repeating a lot of times is that he felt that someone that wasn't at his quote unquote economic status couldn't teach him anything. He felt because he was a quote unquote billionaire that he could, that certain things, somebody that had a lower net worth just couldn't teach him or couldn't say to him. And there's plenty of times at this point to where he got to retract that statement and realize that just because you have this net worth of a certain amount don't mean that you have control of your value. And so it's important that we see that, important that we recognize, again, the difference between the currency and economics, and that the currency is basically the process of controlling that economics. And so when you dive into the ones that are controlling the currency, that's how you tap into the source of the power base itself.
Now you talk
here. Let me say this real quick.
Go ahead.
If you zoom out and you apply this shit historically, and one thing white folks always try to do when we talk about the enslavement of African people is say, well, y'all were doing it. Well, it was Africans that sold Africans to the white folks. And they're right. Those Europeans then understood their game well enough to exploit the greed of certain folks who were in positions of power. And so while we may have had our own rules regarding slavery, antiquated as it was, there was still the ability of the oppressor to come in and exploit that, take advantage of it. So they did exactly that. They blew the king or the chieftain or whoever's head up really big, made him feel good about himself, shot him a few dollars, and he sold his people, literally sold his people. And if we fast forward that to somebody like Kanye or any of the rest of them, it's the same shit. They're blowing their head up with access to money and making them think that they're somewhere they're not. So when we sit back and try to use that excuse with ourselves, we have to look at who are we supporting. We're supporting Kanye's and all the rest of these cats to play the same role that the folks that we'll turn around and accuse or are historically correct in saying that we sold our own people into it. Well, fuck, you still selling your own people into it. Just like those sisters and brothers couldn't see it then, you can't see it now. And you got to wipe that shit off of your eyes and realize what it is for what it is. We all think that we get some type of money and we're somewhere. The reality of it is digital currency. We don't know anything about digital currency, you know, and I don't mean Bitcoin. I mean what is it? The federal government, I forget the letters. The government issued digital currency, basically the government's version of a Bitcoin. It's a digital currency, and we've already been primed for the shit because we use cards on a constant basis to pay for most everything we do, you know, unless we just out there on the street doing whatever, or, you know, have some cash in the pocket. By and large, you got direct deposit. You turn around and swipe your card somewhere or pay online or whatever, being primed for a situation where you have digital currency, which is completely, there's no physical cash. Like if you have 20 bucks in the bank now, you can take that 20 bucks out if you can get around the fee and have a $20 bill. Digital currency issued by the government has no $20 bill. It's just on a computer. So they can program this shit so that the next time they say that there's a lockdown, they don't have to worry about you going anywhere because they can program the money that's in your bank account, the money that you think you have and that you own. They can program that so that it only works within a certain circumference from your house. In other words, you have that money. You can go up to Walmart up the street, buy whatever and come home. But you try to go to your Home Depot or something that's 6 miles further, your card's not going to work because they've turned it off. If they decide you can pay your rent, you can buy some food, and that's it, okay, you can't buy no more Xbox or no red bottom shoes because they done programmed your shit accordingly. It's a greater level of control. And if you think that's not the case, think about this. We talk about how it's our money, which it's really not. Once you give it to the bank, it's no longer yours. That's in their paperwork. They acknowledge that straight up. But you are only allowed to access a certain amount of that money every day. Everybody that has a debit card has a withdrawal limit. So if it's $600 or $800, whatever, you can have $20,000 in the bank. Unless you go down, which a lot of use banks that don't even have branches anymore, you know, things like Chime and Ally and whatever, they're strictly online. So unless you go down and can find an actual branch, go down there and take the money out physically, you can only get to whatever percent they say. If they say today you can only get $10 out, you can only get, they did that shit in Greece when they were facing a bunch of economic stuff a few years ago. They cut people off and said, you can only get this much of your money, your fucking money. Understand that. They control your fucking money. It ain't your money. You're playing their game. So we're being conditioned for them to control us through our money on a daily basis. And we're all used to it. We all accept it. If you have over a certain amount in a bank and you go down there to take that shit out and you want your money, if you're over a certain limit, you got to wait until they go get some more cash from another bank because they don't actually keep beyond a certain amount of cash in the bank. So even then, if you go down to the bank, you can only get a certain amount of your money. And that's a part of the economic game. All of this shit is based on debt. They don't have enough cash money that if we all went down there to take our money out right now, we couldn't all get it because there's not enough cash in circulation. There's not enough gold to back all the cash. It's bullshit. So it's this economic game that they're playing with us. It's a facade and it's an illusion. And we have to realize that not only is land a resource, but the first resource is the people. We are our own resource. And if we don't start using our own resource to affect our lives in the best way possible, then we keep playing that fucking game.
Explain
we'll
that.
all be fucking Kanye's in this bitch.
You say that the people are the first resource. The people, you say the people are the first resource. Break that down. Explain that. Help us understand that.
Well, I mean, the land, it's like people get upset and worried about, okay, like the climate bullshit, climate crisis. There is no climate crisis. Simple. Oh, I think I just got us banned. My bad. Just because the fact of the matter is the earth is going to be all right. Nature is going to be all right. Humanity might be dead and gone, but the earth is going to be all right. Nature takes care of itself. It knows how to cleanse itself and get rid of whatever is wrong. And we are part of what is wrong, then we'll be gotten rid of. So the first resource is the people, because the land is just going to be the land. If we're talking about building civilizations and families and all of that, we have to have the proper mind state to do that. Because as we've seen, Kanye and others with a fucked up mindset going into this game, trying to play this game, are not doing anything to benefit the masses of the people. Kanye and them and Jay-Z and all them can buy a whole bunch of land, so what? That doesn't help us. It's a whole bunch of wealthy motherfuckers. Oprah giving money to build schools and whatnot on the continent of Africa. It's not helping us because it's not doing anything to develop the mindset of the people. The people are the resource that utilizes other resources. We are the economics. We have to start looking at it like that. From an African perspective, we're the economics, not the money, not the cash, because fuck all of that. We can build things without a whole bunch of money. We can build farms without a whole bunch of money. We can build, whatever we need without a whole bunch of money if we had the right mindset. Organizations like OBU started out with 5 members and blew up to do all the things that they were able to do, a school and a library and all of these things that they built with just 5 members because they understood that they were the resource. They are the economics. They made the sacrifices of the red bottom shoes and the big screen TVs and all of that to put their resource time, their effort, their energy, whatever change they had into building and developing the land. The land is going to sit there and do what the land do. It don't give a shit about you. But if we have the right mindset and we utilize ourselves as a resource that's in charge of utilizing resources, then we can get something done. But as long as we trip like that, the African king that was bribed to sell his people into 2,000 years of craziness or 400 years, whatever, of this madness, then we'll continue down this path. And looking at these icons that are these buffoons that are propped up in front of us that add nothing to our lives, but help us be numb from the pain. And it's crazy. We have to numb ourselves from the pain caused by getting the money to numb ourselves from the pain. If you get rid of the fucking pain in the first place, you wouldn't have to numb yourself so much and you could deal with reality a whole lot better. But it's a lot easier just to numb that pain, make some money, stress ourselves, work all day, work on the weekends, work whenever, and grind, and then take a nice vacation to Hawaii or Tahiti or wherever once a year, or hell, twice a year or 3 times a year. But your day-to-day life is a grind to put money in their pockets, because no matter how wealthy you get, I don't care how much money you're making, they're making a lot more off of you. And that's whether you're an entrepreneur or you're an employee, you're still a slave to the system. What Malcolm said, as long as you're south of the Canadian border, you south. And that's what it is. You're going to be a slave entrepreneur or a slave worker, but you're still a slave, because we're not talking about the company you work for. That's small time shit. We're talking about the entire economic system that is manipulated and controlled by those that are actually in power. And I'm trying my best not to say certain words, but I'm having a hard time. I'm just going to say, ooh, 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 ooh.
Hey, let me add to this a little bit. And the point I want to make here is kind of goes back to what E is talking about in regards to the people being the real resource. And again, I have to go back to when I talked about the difference between economics and currency, because from that standpoint, currency again is the control of economics, which is then over the resource. So what was done in order to take people away from their ability to recognize that, which is even going into a cliche that the Panther say, all power to the people, is that in itself is the recognition that the people is the power. Now, the thing that's kind of funny about that most people don't equate to is when we talk about power, period, that the term power actually gets into the idea of energy systems. And the economics is nothing more than an energy system use of what natural law does with current, or which is then considered to be currency. So when we talk about current, we're basically talking about the flow. In a natural law, current is basically the flow of something, which goes into how nature creates weather patterns in order to control the flow of basically the reproductive cycle of life on Earth. That's what currency is. So now when you talk about those that are in power, they've developed what's called a wealth structure. A wealth structure is what allows them to be able to create a condition of currency utilized on social engineering perspectives. So now when you create this wealth structure, then at that point, you're able to create what makes a separation between economy and resources. That's not possible unless you create a wealth structure. So creating a wealth structure then gives you ability to be able to now control currency, because now you have people at that point in time not recognizing that I have everything that I need as a people to create whatever we need to create in order to live off the land, in order to thrive as a people, as a society. But once you create a wealth structure, now all of a sudden you pin the people against each other. And then that creates a situation to where you have to have a currency in place that can then be used to determine my wealth or my amount of exchange between each person. So you divide the people up now. You created a division. By creating that division, now all of a sudden, you know, certain my stock, or when I say stock, I'm talking about whatever it is on my land that I use as a resource. Now that has a certain value versus what you have that you can offer up to the trade. So no longer are we willing to just have equal exchange with one another, but we create this system of wealth which divides us amongst each other. And by dividing us amongst each other, now you have to have this artificial means come in and determine the value system that we are going to create an exchange between one another from. And by controlling that value system that is used by the people, now you have what I said, control of that currency. By controlling that currency, whoever creates that currency creates that system that everybody buys into. Those are the ones that have the power, because at any given time, going back to when I talked about economic capacitance, when you put your money in a bank, you are generating capacitance for that institution. So the banking institution now has capacitance based upon how much money you put in there. That money is considered, or that capacitance is considered your net worth or your value. This is how much you have generated, and have what we refer to as potential. This is potential. It's not kinetic. It's potential. The kinetic value, or the economic conductance, has to do with basically that stored value, or the amount of money that you got. What can it produce in terms of, not produce, but what it can buy. Which is called that conduction. So in other words, if I got $100, what can $100 buy me at the time of exchange? Because the whole thing about the capacitance of that $100 is that variable can change at any given time. So as long as it's in its capacitance state, which is meaning it's in its savings state, and that's why they use the word savings, which is why as long as it is being saved, it is being it's stored energy. Once that energy or that exchange needs to take place, now you're dealing with the conductance. But at that moment of time that conductance take place, what is that capacitance worth at that point in time? And then once you make that exchange, that goes back into what we refer to as the induction, which has to do with the services or the people power, or the power that exists between the accepted value between capacitance and conductance. So again, you get people to buy into this energy system, or the way this system is going to be controlled, which is the currency. Then that is used to monitor, manipulate, and see to it that the people never put the value back in themselves, which is where you get the concept of the economy. which economy on the natural law terms goes into how the entire ecosystem is codependent upon itself, which again is part of the problem. That codependency that we have is based upon our reliance upon a currency system, which is fictitious, which is used to control an economic system which is tied to the actual real tangible resources. And then one thing I want to say, which maybe we hit on a little bit later, as the population continues to grow, going back to what I said about the land itself, there's only so much land on the planet, period, point blank. So when you take a piece of that, going back to what I said about a volume, and you control that volume, but yet the population continues to grow, but yet that growth rate is not going to be able to equate to the volume on the planet, the available volume on the planet, which goes into the whole resource aspects. Now you have to gear the people away from what's referred to as a actual tangible resource, which is why, for instance, the currency can never be any longer backed by a physical resource, which was at one point in time that exchange was gold. Currency can't be backed by gold anymore because the population itself is too large to do that level of exchange over that actual natural resource. Because we're dealing with a larger level of population, that's impossible. So since that's impossible, you had to create a fictitious system that did not have to be backed by actual tangible resource. And now the game has changed and upped itself even more to where land in itself, that volume that I talked about, is not looked upon as being a real resource anymore. The way they've done that is they created a virtual reality, a virtual world. And by creating this virtual world that people are buying now space into, you now create a situation where people don't value or realize the actual importance of the physical, tangible land mass and land base. So the people now become trapped in a system to where they want to put stock or put their services and their inductance into a virtualized environment, which has infinite amount of space, because it's not real. But yet we're at a point in our technological advancement to where the perception can actually be perceived as being a real place that you can go to because of where they're tapping into in terms of the technological advancement and being able to tap into your brain and into how the brain operates, which when the whole thing with the neural net, and then I'm gonna leave that alone with
you're getting a little too far out there.
Yeah, with the neural, where that goes, that's once that kicks into gear, then people are now not going to need that physical currency that Brother E talks about, because that also goes into the digital currency, because you're dealing with the digital world. So everything is making a transition to the digital world, the digital environment, and the virtual environment. So people are not going to associate land anymore with power. And so that leaves the elite to be able to be the complete controllers of that volume.
So let me unpack this thing right quick to make sure that we still on point before we move on to the next subject. Let me unpack it real quick. So essentially, and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, essentially what you brothers have been saying is this, is that essentially when we look at economics, you know I love words, the basic definition of economics is the proper management of resources. And there's a difference between resources and currency. When we understand the difference between resources and currency, the people who actually have power over their community are focused on controlling resources. And the people who find themselves trapped in a cycle playing somebody else's game find themselves focused on trying to acquire currency. If I'm making sure I understand exactly what you brothers have been trying to teach us and tell us. And that's why we find people like Kanye West or Kyrie Irving or any of the other brothers who have found themselves in a position to be sanctioned and censored. They're playing somebody else's game. Kyrie is dribbling the ball for a team or even in a field that was created by another community of people. Kanye is singing, making beats and dancing in an industry that was created and controlled by another group of people. So we as a people are not controlling these industries. And that's why whenever you think you too big and get out of line, you could be reeled back in because you are playing somebody else's game. And as long as you're playing somebody else's game by their rules, you have to recognize no matter how much money you think you have, you are an economic slave. And in order for people to truly be free, they start to take control of resources. And that's what other ethnic groups of people have done. They understand that I have to control resources. I have to control resources. And one of the things that has been done, according to what you brothers are basically telling us, is that first, a certain group of people, white people, Europeans, realized that the ultimate resource was land. So they started going around the world, carving up the earth like a big piece of pie, trying to control the land, because they realized that every other resource came from the land. And the land was the one thing that they wasn't making no more of. So if I control the land, then I controlled every other resource. Then later they started realizing that the ultimate resource was the people. So to control the people, you had to control the thinking of the people. And that's why the Panther Party said all power to the people, because the Panther Party, the brothers that started the Panther Party, recognized that true power was in the hands of the people. And because when you recognize such a thing, if you control the thinking of the people and the direction of the people, and you keep them focused on red bottoms and these expensive bags and all this other nonsense that our people have been focused on, that these shiny things, if you keep them focused on that, then the people won't even recognize their own power. And that the only way for people to truly have power is to recognize that they are the ultimate resource and take control of their own thinking and their own economics and their own resources. Did I get that right?
Thank you, brother.
Good. You paying attention. I'm proud of you.
You showed yourself brave and loyal. Certain privileges will be granted you. Your work will be less burdensome. You will command others' burden. And as a reward for winning us the game, I'll let you choose a woman for yourself. But know that we will never make you a free man. The stench of a low-born slave cannot escape him.
That is why we were brought here in the first place, to increase the master's chance of making more money.
If you don't understand that, then you won't ever make sense out of anything else about the plantation.
Who can make the plantation owners more money?
If you don't understand that,
the companies that we work for today are primarily concerned with making money.
then you won't ever make sense out of anything else about the plantation.
Priority 1.
Understand that.
Everything else is secondary, because with money, all other forms of control is made easy. The last thing that the master wanted to do was to have to destroy or resell one of his prized African bucks. So they devised a way to get the African to work for him and against each other. Willie Lynch came up with a viable way of achieving this goal. First of all, he had to get the fear of the African and utilize that fear to get him to work against each other. The first priority was to change the mindset of all Africans.
If you don't understand that,
Change the mindset. Change the mindset. He had to get the fear of the African and utilize that fear to get him to work against each other.
then you won't ever make sense out of anything else about the plantation.
That is why we were brought here in the first place, to increase the master's chance of making more money.
He would gather all of them out behind the barn Then in front of all the Africans, he would single out the strongest brother, the warrior with the biggest, strongest muscle. He'd challenge him to a fight. But he would not fight the brother himself, no, he was too afraid. Instead, he would have about 5 big dumb redneck white boys with bats and clubs to jump the brother at the same time. Often the brother was strong enough to take out 1 or 2 of the bat-swinging crackers himself, but he would soon be forced to give in to the pain of having his head and just about every other part of his body bashed, as he would eventually fall to the ground in a heap of blood and broken bones. And they would continue to beat him mercilessly. They would beat him nearly to death. There would be blood everywhere. The other Africans can't help because the master has a couple of more white boys with shotguns standing ready to gun down any African who attempted to help their fallen brother. The beaten brother would lay there, unable to move, because his whole body was busted up. His head was just a bloody mess. That is when the master would step up and continue the beating by himself while yelling at the rest of the Africans. He would tell them in between blows that this is his nigger. You are my niggas, niggas, niggas. And any nigger that didn't acknowledge him as the only real man on the plantation would get beaten in the same way. The Africans would look on. Some of them in anger, but all of them in fear. You are my niggas. Niggas. Niggas.
That is why we were brought here in the first place, to increase the master's chance of making more money.
If you don't understand that, then you won't ever make sense out of anything else about the plantation.
He is telling you there's one goddamn reason you shouldn't go up there right now and slit the throats of every last one of these Dutch motherfuckers and set fire to this ship. Let the motherfucker burn.
Let me add one more thing to that. Because it goes into what you was talking about the, again, what we said earlier about the people power. This is what we call capital. Capital is basically to monetize a resource. Once you bring a monetary value to a resource, which is what I meant when I went into talking about creating a wealth structure. So where we fail to see our power is the fact that, kind of like what you said about the music industry, is that when we did it as an attachment through our culture. This is how we express ourselves through our culture. But what happened is those people, the ones that we talked about that are the untouchables, they came in and they created a monetary value to our culture. And then they made it for sale. By making it for sale, now I can take what you already naturally are and I can tie a wealth structure to it, and then I can sell it back to you. And so that is what's called capital. So from that standpoint, when you are able to monetize a resource, now all of a sudden you can attach it to your currency. When you attach it to your currency, now you're attaching that control to access to that resource. So this is where people like, and to give you a good example of that, this is where you get the concept of saying the game is to be sold, not to be told. That comes from the fact that now I've created a monetary value to my knowledge. I created a monetary value to you even knowing of the existence of this concept, which is why we also say knowledge is power. But when we say knowledge is power, we have to also talk about how that power, that knowledge can be monetarized. Once it's monetarized, that's basically goes into also when we say selling your soul, because when you sell your soul, that basically means your culture, your identity, and who you are and what you are is up for sale. That's why I talked about earlier when I talk about the acronym of AIDS as it applies to social engineering, again, which is acquired identity deficiency syndrome. because once we sell ourselves, once we create a monetary value system that equates everything that a real resource is in dealing with natural law, then at that point, it's for sale. Once it's for sale, whoever controls the currency is going to automatically be in control of the economics, which makes them automatically in control of the resource, because everybody buys into that system. So once everybody buys into the system that is controlled by a small percentage of a population, then again, now all of a sudden they have direct access to this land tangible volume and everything that is contained, which goes back into the elements of earth, air, water, and fire. See, now we're dealing with alchemy, and we deal with the metaphysic aspects of it that appears to be metaphysics, which is really physics from that standpoint. And so creating that capital system that we're talking about, this is how the people become codependent and become what we would call domesticated, because at that point now you're dealing with a people that do not see their value, because again, their culture has been monetized and their way of life has been monetized, and they've been reduced down to the individual. And so that individual is suffering from an identity. Being that it suffers from an identity, now its identity is being sold back to it. So that goes into how we are paying for our own enslavement that we started talking about.
All right, I have a question. This is not a slanderous question. This is just to create some definitions, because one of the things that happened with Kanye was called anti-Semitic. Kyrie Irving was called anti-Semitic. And we can see this historically. Dr. Khalid Abdul-Muhammad was called anti-Semitic. Farrakhan was called anti-Semitic. Professor Griff was called anti-Semitic. So, and some of these brothers, even Kanye, he said that he was a Jew. He said he was a Jew, so how could he be anti-Semitic? So what I want us to do now is not from any kind of position of any kind of malice, is to define what is a Jew, who are the Jews, and what makes a person anti-Semitic.
Oh, you weren't supposed to say that word. You're going to get us in trouble. You know, no matter how much you apologize, or not even apologize, that wasn't really an apology, but preempted with, this is just, you know, we're friendly and nice. It don't fucking matter. Jew is just someone who practices a Jewish religion. Judaism, it's a religion. And people try to say, oh, it's a race. No, Whoopi Goldberg is a Jew. It's not got anything to do with all of that, because words get so convoluted and mixed up and messed up, especially in terms of religion and shit. I got to the point where I hated to deal with certain organizations because that's all they could fucking hear. The reality of it is, whatever you want to name, you want to put on it, because you can talk about the Rothschilds and all types of secret groups. There are those quote unquote Jewish people who are just regular folk who go to synagogue and go home. But then there are those within this Kabbalah, within this deep state within the Jewish faith or whatever. Just like in Christianity, they got the Pope and all the secret goings-ons and the battles behind the doors to control and manipulate and all of those things. They do the same fucking thing. It's a pursuit of power by any group of people. They've been very successful at it, in part because they were the ones who were doing a lot of the financing, or most of the financing, for the so-called slave ships back in the day. You know, and it's not anything to do with their nature or any of that shit. It's that it's their gang. This group of people who at some point, whether before or after they made it, joined this clique called Jews and organized to amass an amount of power and have that power grow and grow and grow. So, all of that, throwing that shit around is just some more of those words that they put out there so that they'll have something that they can cut somebody off with, cut them off at the knees and cry, oh, we're the chosen people. Oh, we've been through so much. Oh, Lord Jesus, help me. Or not Jesus, but you know what I mean. Oh, help, help. So it's just another clique. It's just another way to manipulate the resources into a position that it gives them power. You know, your boy on the other side of the equation, old Muammar, one of the main reasons, I don't say it's the only reason, but it's a huge reason that he got chopped down because he was working on with other African leaders to create an African denomination, like the European Union has what is it called, the EU, what is it shit called, the Euro? Yeah, that crap. Yeah. So he was working with cats on the continent to create an African currency backed by gold, backed by actual things. And the US and Europe and powers that be to work off this fiat shit knew that there was a problem. You know, Nixon and them took the US off of the gold standard so that they could manipulate the value of the dollar, so that they could go through with this petrodollar thing and have us propped up. But as countries like the BRICS nation, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and now Saudi Arabia wants to join, Iran wants to join, have created a basket of currencies to use as the new standard. And this basket of currencies is based on tangible commodities, much more stable. You know, the shit that we're dealing with here is bound by economic law to fail at some point. Rome did the same damn thing and their economy collapsed. So it's not even, it's a matter of time because it's already begun. And this is one of the things that the whole prepper mindset, which is no longer a prepper. I don't think, I can't call anybody a prepper because the shit's happening now in real time. You see where the debasement of the dollar and the devaluing of the dollar has caused prices to rise. That shit's not going to go in reverse. The deficit's getting bigger, expenditures are getting bigger, more and more money is being tossed around, created out of thin air. And those of us in this country who live just a humble life, a life that would still be seen in many other countries as extravagant, as grandiose, as really, really big timing. And I'm not talking about big timing for us. I'm not talking about like Sykes sitting up there in Huey's old penthouse. It looks like he done moved into Huey's spot. But you know, just us in regular day-to-day life, we are going to have a much more difficult time because we do not understand resources, because we put all of our faith and our confidence in a government, in white folks, in a currency that cannot be sustained. And as it falls, just like in the Matrix, the more connected you are to that shit when it crashes, the more hurt you're going to have, the more pain you're going to feel. As it goes down and you can't afford to do the things that you used to do, or you can't find a man who makes as much money as you because of whatever the situation is, but you put all your value and your worth in the check and what it brings home, as opposed to the values that are important to us as a people. One of the things that when these in positions of power back on the continent, as slavery, as the enslavement of African people began to really take off, when those brothers, when we sold our sisters and brothers into enslavement to these Europeans, one of the things that it did for those who were doing the selling was that it detached them and distanced them from what matters most to the African, and that's the community. That's we've always known that to be our base of power, is the people. And as we did that, it created a divide between us and them, haves and have-nots. And that shit has been maintained throughout. Cats like Jay-Z and others, a lot of times, I know, I haven't read it, but I know they say certain things and go and put out certain types of music with it either consciously or buried a little bit back in the back of their mind that they have something to prove. I'm still from the street. I'm still with y'all. I mean, I live in a $10 million house, but don't let that, that's irrelevant. I got 30 Bentleys back there. Don't let, but I'm still just like you. Nigga, no, you're not. You're not. That's just the way it is. You can see it in cats. And I love Ice Cube. Well, I love his music. I don't know the cat, but I love his older music. But you could tell a change in his music, in the rock that he used to have in NWA days and what was that? Was that America's Most Wanted and all of those, versus those albums that he would put out after he started making movies and shit. He was comfortable. It was nice. It was like he didn't have that same drive. He was detached from the pain of the people. And that's what that shit does. And it's the same with any industry. And look at the NBA. When you got cats in the Final Four, and not the Final Four, but March Madness, college basketball. If you ever get a chance, I know y'all ain't into sports like that. I'm not either, but I love the March Madness because of the energy. Because you got these cats that are in college, they got 4 years, maybe a little bit more, sometimes less. 4 years to show that they got what it takes to be in the NBA. And you got the juniors and the seniors who know this is my last year or my next to get last year. I got to really come out here and put everything on the line for the championship. And they go out and there's just this energy that's palpable that is not there when you get to the NBA. Even if you look at the NBA finals, that energy, because you got basically a bunch of millionaires playing ball. You got a bunch of spoiled ass babies out there, whining because of the car, wow. They don't give it their heart. They don't give it their all anymore. Because when the game is over, instead of going back and getting some ramen, or if they're really good, the coach will buy them some burgers and whatnot when they're in college. But instead of going back to some type of grind to prove yourself, you get to go stay in your multi-million-dollar mansion, drive in your multi-million-dollar car, whatever it is, and have everything nice and luxurious. So there's this detachment from the suffering of our people that really and it's not even the shoes and the clothes and the houses that we're fighting after. Because if it was, we would get one and be done. But we don't. We have to buy more shoes and more cars, more Nikes and more and more and more, because it's not the thing. It's the power that we feel. What's that phrase? It's a real thing. Retail therapy. It's not having the thing. It's about exercising your power to go out and get the thing. You know what I mean? At one point in life, we couldn't get shit. But then we get to this point in life, well, shit, I can go out and get this. I'm going to go get this. And we get a buzz off of that shit. And we feel good about that shit. And this system has learned how to play that shit and keep us at odds with one another, because we do put all the value in that. Now, I don't know if that answers the questions about Jews or not, but yeah, those untouchable people, it's just a fucking religion. It's a religion. It's like any other part of the government. You can say Jews did it. You can say the Rothschilds. You can say the deep state. The reality of it is it doesn't change our game plan, what our game plan needs to be. It doesn't change what hasn't worked, but what could work. What hasn't worked is all the bullshit you see from BLM, people on the streets, and all that bullshit, to the whole idea of integration and all of that. None of that shit has worked. So our game plan still has to be to dig into ourselves and find out what works for ourselves, because we keep trying to take other people's systems that were never designed for us. We were never meant to be a part of this system in any other capacity but slaves. We keep trying to make that shit work for us. And these days, work for us means numbing our pain and giving us this illusion that John Henry Clark used to talk about, giving ourselves an illusion that we belong. That somehow, when Thomas Jefferson said that all men are created equal, he meant us. This motherfucker owned black people. How the fuck did he mean us? No, he didn't mean us. George Washington owned black people, was raping black girls, little girls, 16-year-old girls. That's what George Washington did. Fuck that motherfucker. But we have put value in believing what they say, what they've done, and we bought into their illusion. And so we have to numb ourselves and do all of these mental gymnastics to make it work for us. So we have to dig into our own history, who it is we were before all of this shit, so we can find something that actually works.
Let me add to that real quick, because kind of going into the essence of your question, it goes right back to what I said when I talked about capital and what capital is. Because whoever defines or controls the definition of what the untouchable, or in this case the Jews are the ones that control the value system, ones that control the currency, the ones that control the economics. So as it applies to that in terms of the capital system, is that we can talk about the pre-biblical, quote unquote, pre-biblical texts, and we deal with, and brother, he can definitely dive into this if he wants to, but when we talk about our spiritual systems as Africans, before the Europeans monetized it. Because at that point, once it was monetized, once our spirituality was monetized, that gave them the power over us. Because of that, at that point, they considered themselves to be the holders and the keepers of religion. And at that point, it was monetized. At that point, now that I am the one that is the keeper and the controller of your religion, now I can add a wealth or a value system to it. And therefore, I can rewrite your history. And now that I've rewritten your history at that point, now I've written myself to be the people who you once were. And once I've done that, now that's how you get the ability to take Kemet or what they call Egypt out of Africa. Now you start getting to this concept of what is the Middle East, or you start creating this fictitious concept of where land is. And by creating this fictitious concept of where land is, as well as adding value to one particular land mass based upon those that are in control of that land mass, and not even get into how you have redefined it, and they're taking it from a people who originally took it from a people who took it from a people who now again are monetizing that and are the controllers of that religious perspective and that religious value. Then everything that is attached to that lie or that misconstrued or that rewritten history is going to be under that control. And so from that standpoint, once the history was rewritten as to who are the Semitics for that standpoint, now once that history is rewritten, the ones that control and are the current holders of that history are the current ones that are in control of that capital. Being there in control of that capital, that basically puts everybody else under that system. Because as long as everybody is buying into the current holders of that history, the current holders of that culture, then everyone else is under them by default. That automatically puts you under them by default. And then whatever position of wealth that they want to attach to you now, you have to accept that position. Why? Because you are codependent upon the system that you bought into, which is going to feed itself right back to you. And when it does that, you are going to be paying for your enslavement from that point moving forward. So again, we don't see the bigger picture. And by us not seeing the bigger picture, by us not seeing that our livelihood and what makes us as humans being up for sale by those elite intentionally, then we again create this entire, or should I say, hold up this entire slave system, which is why, from the standpoint of when you get into what's referred to as sacred societies, which goes right back into what, and this is for conspiracy's sake, for those folks that want to get into that. When you talk about the Illuminati, or those that hold up that aspect and all the derivatives of that, they understand that knowledge is power. They understand that once I control and manipulate the mindset of the people, and I cause the people to basically fall up under my definition of what power is, at that point, everything else is just a lie, which goes into what I like to think about or use as an example within the 48 laws of power. Law number 31: control the options. Get other people to play the cards that you deal. The best exceptions are the ones that seem to give the other person a choice. Your victims feel they're in control, but they're actually puppets. Give people options that come out in your favor, whichever way they choose. Force them to make choices between the lesser two evils, both of which serve your purpose. And from that standpoint, that's exactly what they do. And so as long as they recognize that, again, because we are not understanding the true definition of what capital is, the true definition of what currency is, and the true definition of what economics is, and what resources are. Because we have traded true resources for currency, we're going to continue to have that grip over us of being basically victims and being codependent, and to be, again, cattle of their system.
Okay, we finna get ready to bring it to a close. I'm just gonna shoot y'all a few things, see what y'all think about this. And Kanye said, okay, first, Kanye West's White Lives Matter shirt.
What?
Kanye West, his White Lives Matter shirt. Remember, he was flossing all around in his White Lives Matter shirt. What do you think? What do you think inspired that? Where do you think that came from? Why do you
Stupidity.
think Kanye West had to put on a White Lives Matter shirt?
He want attention. I mean, it ain't no. Look. See, here's the thing. It's one of the things that if you a performer and you performing at that level, you always performing. When you got motherfuckers coming into your life filming reality shows, you always performing. It was just a performance. He don't know why he did it. He ain't got no master plan, no hidden agenda to, pop open the heads of the minds of the masses and free us. This motherfucker ain't doing all that shit. This dude put on some shit to get some attention. Maybe his shoe sales was starting to peter off, so he trying to get some attention, or he about to release a new album, need to get some attention. Either way, it's all a sideshow. None of that shit is relevant to us. And that's what we have to realize, that this shit is step and fetch it. It's bucking and grinning. It's doing what the oppressor has rewarded him to do for doing in the past. So he's going to continue to do it. So yeah, this dude ain't no fucking genius. He might have some skills on the mixing and whatnot here and there, but this motherfucker ain't no political genius. He ain't with the war games that we have to deal with.
And who was that said? I can't remember who it was. I was just watching recently. They said everybody keeps calling this dude a genius. What? Because he made some beats? He said, y'all acting like this guy cured cancer or something. I can't remember who that was said that.
And that's one of the things, people talk about they want to make rap music. I don't want to make music. I want to make music. And it's crazy to me. I make music. I done made several songs over the past couple of years. I ain't got one fucking red cent for the shit, but I'm still making it because in part, I enjoy doing it. It's a part of my expression. So if it's really about the expression and the culture and the art and all of those pretty sounding things, those noble sounding things, then don't worry about, go get you a fucking job, make you some music on the weekend. If it's really about making music, if it's really about, expressing whatever your art, if it's really about that, then turn the monetization of the shit off, because that's what they're exploiting. They're exploiting that shit. And that's why so much of the music sounds like shit, is because it's not about us and the call and response and talking about what we've been through, where we're at, where we can go. We don't talk about none of them things. We talk about what we've been rewarded for talking about, which is, hey, I got nice and basically making commercials. We make commercials for the oppressor. Go buy this shiny shit because I got shiny shit. Go fuck some more bitches because I got a bunch of bitches. This is what we do. So it's about trying to appease the oppressor still. Our art, our music, that's a resource. That's how we talk, especially for African people. White people ain't got it, but especially for African people, our music and art is a true life commodity. It's a real resource for us. You ain't even got to go back but to the old so-called slave times when we communicated about how to get off the plantation and where to go to find the Underground Railroad, blah, blah, blah. We wasn't just say, hey, go down the street till you see the fork in the road and you see a house down, that's where you, no, we were singing the shit. We were putting our shit in codes. And that's how important, even in our hair, with certain braids and certain ways and whatnot, and when we wear hair, all of that is a real life resource for us that we have to take back. And Kanye is not the ambassador of taking it back. None of them are. They're ambassadors of continuing to sell. I'm gonna use the phrase. I'm gonna use it, goddammit. They're continuing to sell out. They're selling the fuck out. We all sell out every day. Why not be on the winning team? Fuck that. Go down with the ship. Let your pathetic life at least be given up for something worthwhile.
Let me add to this just from an artistic perspective.
Oh shit.
You're not even so artistic to eat. I'm gonna say musical perspective, because I do see Kanye as being a musical genius.
Bullshit.
Yes, he is. The problem is
off the team.
We equate the word genius across the board, and that's our biggest mistake. No, he is not an intellectual genius. No, he is not an economic genius. No, he is not a political genius. Now, when I say musical genius, let me break that down. Musical genius as in the same person that I think we definitely and I'm just going to throw this out there for the Panther 48 channel, out of study from a musical perspective, and that's people like Jay Dilla. Jay Dilla was a definite musical genius. Did Jay Dilla get the level of economic power that Kanye had? No, because again, we're talking about just the musical aspect. So the problem you have with Kanye is that by being a musical genius, he allowed his ego and allowed himself to get the big head syndrome and became basically not recognizing that since he's operating as the overseer on the plantation, he started thinking that he had power, more power than what he really had as an overseer. So therefore the term genius got detached from musical. And therefore he started calling himself a genius period in general. And by doing that, he started believing his own funk. He started believing that he had more power and more genius than what he really has. I do consider him a musical genius because when I look at a musical genius, I look at somebody that has the ability to see musical pattern and manipulate musical pattern where there was none recognizable before that. And being able to do it in such a way that it is powerful, and a lot of other people also, if given the platform, would accept that same thing. Now, the difference between that and the economic attachment to it are two totally different things. Now, going back to what he said, he allowed himself to be exploited. He bought into that exploitation and he capitalized off that exploitation, which is the only way you can transform a talent anyway into a monetary form, or be willing to sell your soul, so to speak, from a monetary standpoint, and now make money off of your talents. And so that to me, that's completely separate from the fact that he's a musical genius. Musical genius has to do with the ability to create through that artistic or musical expression. It ain't got nothing to do with money. It ain't got nothing to do with how that expression is exploited, so to speak. So now when you get into the exploitation of our talents or the exploitation of our culture, now you get into what I talked about when I said capital. Because those people that are in power, though the untouchables that we're talking about, are those people that pattern or emulate themselves off of the untouchables, will look at exploitation from the standpoint of, well, how can I monetize what I have access to? And at that point, now we're moving away from anything to me that has to do with that musical aspect. Okay, that we're in a whole different a field of science now. So I did want to make that distinction.
8Ball said in the song, I always quote this song when we talk about this level, or when we talk about this subject. 8Ball said in the song called "The Artist Pays the Price," and he said, "Some find me entertaining, so that makes me marketable. A potential black millionaire, so that makes me targetable. Low life and fork-tongued devils get easy access. Flashing big faces, making empty promises. Soggy niggas sign contracts and make deals, rapping about who they kill, talking about they keeping it real. Hardcore homicidal kingpins of the century need to quit rapping and lead this shit to the real MCs. But on the other hand, opposing forces got the upper hand, do as they command to keep us from suffering." And I love this song because he's talking, if you listen at the lyrics in the song, he's talking about this same subject. And he's saying the same thing over and over and over again. And the chorus of the song, he says, the artist pays the price so we don't have to pay. If only we would listen to what he has to say. He said, we all go through changes to keep on growing. We got to learn the life of sacrifice to keep on growing around the way. You know, he talks about this in that song. Beautiful song to me. And, you know, I first heard it when I was a rapper, when I was rapping myself. That's why the song hit home, you know, and it's basically saying the same things that you brothers are saying now. And Kanye in that Drink Champs interview, he said it. You know, it's ironic, you know, because he contradicts himself a lot. He go from 1 minute to saying slavery was a choice, and that people that were slaves chose to be slaves. He go from 1 minute saying something like that to the next minute criticizing today's rap, saying that we are the only people that makes money of rapping about killing ourselves and staying drunk and messing with each other's wives and staying high. And, he criticized that in that interview. So, he kind of talking about what you talking about as well, E. He talks about, what we're doing with the music. But I'm going to give y'all a chance to say something else before we get ready to close out, because I think we done touched on all our subjects. That's it?
Well, let me say this also. I didn't get to give you my opinion of the whole thing with the shirt. And the way I looked at that, and they even talked about what you was just ending on, talking about him being scatterbrained. I think the reason why he's scatterbrained like that and he mixes up his statements goes into the fact that, to me, when I look at that, I see that it's someone that is suffering from artistic expression and musical expression, and not knowing how to put that creativity, keeping that creativity confined in the realm of music, but all of a sudden starts expressing or starts releasing that same energy in other quadrants and other fields of study. And when he does that, it comes across as being super scatterbrained. And why is it coming across super scatterbrained? Because unlike music, you don't have the ability to undo or cut and paste or go back and remaster or refine that musical pattern or expression. So what happens with him is he get caught up in saying things that create contradictions, because he's no longer operating from the same level of genius that he operates through musical expression, through his wordsmithing in real time. And I think that is a flaw that he is yet to identify about himself, which is, again, why you create those contradictions. Now, as far as the whole White Lives Matter situation t-shirt that he did, I think, again, that what he was attempting to do, he started out saying it was a joke, but I think what he was attempting to do was attempting to monetize and capitalize off of what I see to be both ends of the stick, those that love and those that hate. And when you get into capitalism and you play that game the way it's played at the top, then the idea again goes right back to what I said about law number 31, which goes into the fact that no matter what side you see yourself on, I'm going to make money off of you. Because you got to remember that the elite are the creators and generators and holders and keepers of war. And so they fund all sides of warfare. From that standpoint, when you have two countries at war with each other, go to the source of the weapons. When you go to the source of the weapons, you'll find that source of the weapons is typically going to be a sole supplier that is supplying both sides to fight each other. That is what I mean when I talk about Kanye emulating those that are above him. And by emulating those that are above him, he saw an opportunity to make money off of those people that are filled with hate, as well as make money off those people that are against hate. And I think what he did was he mixed all of his thoughts in the same interview, in the same process, and that destroyed him from that standpoint, because he let one thing be associated with another thing, which goes into elements of seeing him as being bipolar and seeing some of the other elements that come out within flaws within his character. But initially, I think it has to do with attempting to emulate the power structure and how those that are controlling currency are able to make and monetize all sides of the war. And I just wanted to make that point.
All right, unless Brother E got something to add, we feel get ready to close out.
Go ahead, man. Kanye was stupid. Go ahead.
Kanye was stupid.
Genius, my ass.
Well, a lot of people say the guy's a musical genius. They say he the guy.
A lot of people said that slavery wasn't that bad, or any of that other bullshit. Don't make it right.
Well, hey, real quick, Psych, you just said that I got to correct you on.
What?
Considering Kanye musical genius don't make him the GOAT. Okay, I do got to say.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Great. No, he is not the greatest of all time. He is nowhere near the greatest of all time. From the standpoint of sampling, as it applies, I would still give that credit to somebody like Jay Dilla way before Kanye even comes up in the list. All right. So being musically inclined and very tapped in to that creative energy and that process is something that there are a plethora of people that are capable of doing. And all he did was just basically be able to monetize it. So therefore, he was able to get out and be recognized by a larger audience. But there are people that are way more musically genius than he is that are unknowns to the masses. So don't think just because I say somebody's a musical genius that they are in this minor percentile that just because they get recognized that they are the GOATs. Because I honestly think from that standpoint, the ones that become the greatest are those, again, like what E would say, of not sold they sold, have remained in the artistic framework and remain in the expressive framework as their way of life and refuse to monetize it or to even let it be monetized. And that's all I needed to say on that.
And with that, this was your Panther 48. You know, this was our view on economic assassination and why the powers that be decided to go after people like Kanye and Kyrie. We called it the KKK, the killing of Kanye and Kyrie. Kyrie Irving, peace and power.